The next lecture is by Martin Hergouth, to be precise. He has a PhD in philosophy. His dissertation was on Hegel's political philosophy. His main philosophical research interests lie in classical German philosophy and lately artificial intelligence. He's also the editor-in-chief of an important cultural quarterly journal, Rasputia. So his title is Alienation, Abstraction, and Division of Labor, which fits nicely to the last lecture. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Goran, and yeah, thank you all the organizers, all the other organizers. Well, I guess the general sentiment of this conference, as outlined also in the introduction, is that simply a critical bashing of alienation won't quite cut it. Alienation seems to be a bit more insidious problem in modernity, at least. Now, my strategy of addressing this problem here could be described as providing an estimate of the lower bound of necessary alienation, in the same sense that mathematicians sometimes aim to prove lower bound of some value or some quantity. Or to put it into alternative title in line with the template provided by Gregor Moder, alienation or authenticity, not completely sure, but at least this much alienation. And I will deal mostly with the alienation in the sense derived from the Marxist tradition, that is alienation specifically related to economy and labor. Now, we know that the debate on alienation in Marx is related to the question if there is an epistemological break between early and late Marx, as famously proclaimed by Althusser. On the opposing side of the debate, among those who argue for continuity, the argument for discontinuity is, in argument for discontinuity, they often point to the topic of commodity fetishism in Capital, which includes Marx's famous diagnosis how relations between people turn into relations between things. Now, there's quite a lot of opportunity for confusion here. French Marxist philosopher Frank Fischbach, in a book, Sans Objet, for example, pointed out how it is in fact misleading to tie the notion of alienation too tightly with the concepts like objectification or reification or turning into object. As the way Marx analyzes alienation in economical philosophical manuscripts in 1844, so early Marx, which covers topics which relies heavily on the notions of Entäußerung and Gegenständlichung. There, Fischbach argues, the problem of alienation is much better characterized as exactly the lack of object, unfulfilled objectification. So in early Marx, the problem that is pointed out is that the worker does not have the opportunity to externalize himself in the object, as he immediately loses it in the capitalist industrial context. These comments do have merit. However, on the other hand, there definitely is a motive of objectification in Marx, and not just in the commodity fetishism section of the Capital. We can find the same motive earlier in comments on James Mill that was written at the same time as economical philosophical manuscripts, and where there is a fascinating passage that I'm constantly returning to. It's quite famous, you'll know it, and I found it very similar to the. I find it begins a similar thought that will end up in the theory of commodity fetishism later in Capital. So to read the whole passage, the only intelligible language in which we converse with one another consists of our objects in relation to each other. We would not understand a human language and it would remain without effect. By one side, it would be recognized and felt as being a request, an entreaty, and therefore a humiliation, and consequently uttered with feeling of shame or degradation. By the other side, it would be regarded as impudence or lunacy and rejected as such. we are to such an extent estranged from man's essential nature that the direct language of this essential nature seems to us a violation of human dignity, whereas the estranged language of material values seems to be the well-justified assertion of human dignity that is self-confident and conscious of itself. End of quote. So, based on this paragraph, I, on the other hand, propose that there is indeed a split in thought of alienation of Marx, but it is not temporal. They have just always been two separate thoughts of Marx that could both fall under the description of alienation, yet they are in fact distinct thoughts. There is alienation of labor, analyzed in economical philosophical manuscripts, and also present in Grundrisse and Capital, even though in less philosophically loaded terminology that becomes Scheidung, that Nathan analyzed in the morning. And on the other hand, this passage from Comments on James Mill and Commodity Fetishism in Capital constitute its own line of thought. I think there is no good reason to connect these two thoughts of alienation too quickly, too closely. Because only the first thought of alienation, the one from economical philosophical manuscripts, involves a labor process, strictly speaking. The second one happens specifically in exchange. And the first is characteristic of capitalist industrial society. The second appears whenever there is market exchange, especially monetary exchange, which of course covers much broader section of socio-political formation. The opposite of the example of someone who merges these two thoughts of alienation is, of course, Lukács, who connects the objectifying abstraction of a value form with general experience of labor and the experience of abstraction in life world, in modernity in general. Lukács seems to me, in essence, says, because commodity introduces abstraction, therefore modern life, and in particular modern labor, becomes abstract. I mean, is this true? Yes and no. Yes, these two abstractions are related. However, the problem I see, the Lukács too quickly jumps over the details of how these two are related. And then his argument sounds a bit like there is a principle of abstraction inherent to commodity form that then spreads magically over the whole society. This is a problem. Because since Lukács, of course, we have gone through some further development in capitalism, at least one very radical, the transformation in late 20th century that is related to May 68, it's passage from modernism to postmodernism, Keynesianism to neoliberalism, Fordism to post-Fordism. And this break was partly fueled by the critique of the Lukács type, by the critique of the degradation of and abstraction of labor. So it was partly also a rebellion against this cold austerity of high modernist capitalism of early 20th century. And at least to some extent, this rebellion actually succeeded in some perverted form. So there actually was a certain reversal of tendency to abstraction within the labor process, even though capitalism and commodity form persisted quite well. I'm talking about points of Lukács criticism, such as division of subjectivity and personality from labor process. This was reversed. The personality and subjectivity were in late 20th century capitalism tended to be subsumed or into the labor process. Or particularly striking is Lukács analyzes how in capitalism the time is rigidified and stabilized so much that it becomes space, Lukács says. And however, today this rigid structuring of time, it proved to be an extra service of capital to the worker that has been since outsourced to the workers themselves, because now we are paying for self-help books and apps and therapy hours that precisely help us to turn this incessant flow of time into the rigid space. So I'm claiming Lukács' analysis cannot give a good account of these transformations of capitalism, which seems to me it proves that while abstraction inherent to commodity form and abstraction as experience of labor are related, there has to be a certain degree of independence between them so that such opposing conjunctions can appear, at least locally. So much for Lukács. The striking part, back to analysis of exchange in comments of James Mill, we can get some more things from that. The striking part about the analysis of exchange in comments on James Mill is that it involves a perceptible sentimental ambiguity or sentimental shift. There is indignation, outrage about the phenomenon he analyzes, but it gives way to curiosity and intellectual fascination, in the sense that when we ask, how is something possible? How is this possible? This can indicate an outrage, but it can also indicate just curiosity. And Marx kind of asks both. He starts with outrage, and then it turns into earnest question. How is this possible? And of course, in my thesis that the passage from comments on James Mill is a precursor to the analysis of commodity in the capital. In support of that, the question, how is this possible, how is exchange possible, will exactly kickstart the whole conceptual development in the capital. But back to comments on James Mill. In fact, while Marx is describing what he finds problematic in market exchange, he's already beginning to give the answer, how is this possible. By one side, it would be recognized and felt as being a request, an entreaty, and therefore a humiliation, and consequently uttered with feeling of shame, of degradation. By the other side, it would be regarded as impudence or lunacy and rejected as such, end of quote. So it seems to me that Marx is here recognizing, even if he doesn't quite explicitly follow down on this path, that there is in fact, no transparent, no equal, friendly human interaction to fall on if we get rid of the objects in between. The only thing we can fall back on is interaction that would directly and openly introduce a relation of personal inequality and all the awkwardness that comes together with it. Shame, humiliation on one side, impudence and lunacy on the other side. So we could read Marx here as half-heartedly admitting between the lines that this alienated, object-mediated communication is in fact a necessary pendant of relation between independent and sovereign free subjects. Or as Marx continues, it is the communication between objects is a, well-justified assertion of human dignity that is self-confident and conscious of itself. Now, in commodity fetishism section of Capital, this particular line of thought is not really explored further on. However, what we do get from analysis of commodity in Capital is the definite argumentation that this objectification of exchange is strictly related to abstraction. So exchange, interaction already begins and conceptually implies the development of commodity into universal commodity, money, which is commodity whose sole function is to represent the value of other commodities. That is, money is entirely abstract object that is nothing but its abstractness. So, to sum up, from this conjunction of objectification, alienation, and abstraction, I get what would be the general idea or even ideological thrust of my talk here, that objectification and abstraction are related and they have some undeniable pacificatory or enabling function in instituting social link. So there seems to be inherent to modernity, and I claim that it is inherent to modernity before we know that this modernity is capitalist. And they are inherent to it in a way that we might not want to get rid of them completely, or we might want to think twice about this. Okay. This concludes this section, and now something completely else, something completely different. This will be now a second prong of my argument. I will analyze how the notion of abstraction functions in the context of computer engineering. why is computer engineering important or interesting for us here? Now, it's not by the content of the concept of abstraction per se, because what abstraction means in computer engineering, from what I could gather, is not really that striking or surprising. It fits, in fact, quite smoothly with what we, as philosophers, are used to it for it to mean. What it means, well, it's not a completely uniform or precise notion in computer engineering. It has significance on, let's say, different orders of magnitude, because it can describe one operation a particular software engineer performs by coding, or it can describe the relation between whole different layers of technology. This second meaning is the one I will most rely on. It always has a similar conceptual structure. You know, a multitude of states of things on lower level are unified into a single unit on a higher level, of which they now become instances. This is a bit abstract definition of abstraction, and I will be more illustrative in what is to come. But as I said, it's not really a lesson on the conceptual structure of abstraction that I hope to draw from the focus on the computer engineering. Rather, what interests me is the fact that in the computer engineering, the notion has become so widespread that it has gained such currency. So the concept of abstraction ceased to be abstract, but instead became effective, operative concept in daily life of some discipline, and even more importantly, some industry. And because it is operative notion of some industry, we will quickly be able to see that it also involves an economic dimension. Namely, it will prove to be a pivot of division of labor. But yet another reason to focus on computers is that I find computers generally useful thoughts, useful object of thoughts, because they provide a ready-made experience that challenges some of our basic spontaneous ontological beliefs that might have served us more or less well until computers, but now they turn out to be a bit crude. So I will argue that computers and digital technology compels us to believe in the to believe in ontology that includes actuality of abstraction. I will explain I will explain this in what follows in a quick and slightly ambitious tangent about ontology of computing and technology. At the most, generally, we could say that computers are an everyday source of experience, how things can be something and also something else at the same time. So electrical circuits that are at the same time logical operations, word sequences that are at the same time number sequences. Number sequences become configuration of lights on your screen that constitute an image, etc. So, and this experience alone makes it almost intuitively obvious what is wrong with spontaneous ontological conviction of materialist reductionism. That is, ontological position that the ontological position that places ultimate ontological reality at the bottom of things. Because of course, computers are ultimately just electromagnetic current traveling through some complicated arrangement of wires. But such abstract reduction essentially equalizes some faulty circuit that results in fried machine and constitutes a potential fire hazard, or an elaborate program but with an insidious bug that then requires hours of careful examination of huge long sequence of symbols to find a mistake, or this program without this bug that, for example, turns out to be a camera app that enables me to take a selfie or something. So reductionism identifies three states of the matter that differ only minimally at the basic level of existence, but in fact they open up three widely different practical injunctions for the agents that is confronted at them. So they open up three different life worlds. So this is what compels us to believe that something is wrong with materialist reductionism as such, and to instead believe in actuality of abstraction. I claim that abstraction here is a term that best describes that best describes the relation between ranks of reality. And it is the only such term that does so with materialist economy. I claim that it has a rival term in the concept of emergence, but which is in fact a symbiotic opposition to materialist reductionism. So if one's first mistake is to be materialist reductionist, one's second mistake would be to believe in emergence. Because emergence immediately implies something mysterious, magical, something coming out of nothing. The virtue of abstraction compared to emergence is that it actually inverts the direction of reduction. So the reality is not reduced downwards, it is reduced upwards. Reduction in this sense is reduction of complexity. Higher layers of reality are essentially more simple than the ones below. So it is not that this table is in fact just a bunch of atoms. Rather, this bunch of atoms is just a table. So how is this abstraction, ontology of abstraction, relevant in case of machinery? Well, complex machines are complex machines because they perform double relation over their constituent parts. First, they select only a tiny fraction of underlying states of the matter as valid. Sorry. Of underlying states of the matter. So this means only a tiny fraction of electrical circuits can be said to constitute a working computer. And among those that are admitted, their still immense diversity is greatly reduced by selecting only a tiny fraction of properties that actually matter. So the remaining underlying states of the matter are arranged in vast sets of that each count as essentially the same functionally equivalent. I want to say here that, for example, if you have electrical circuit, from the upper layer of abstraction, it will be relatively irrelevant how long some wires are. So as long as it's functionally equivalent. So this is what I mean by abstraction, the reduction of complexity by by abstracting away properties that functionally do not matter. So this is the essence of how computers are built up. An incredibly complex physical reality at subatomic level is abstracted into a sequence of binary states that can be represented as a sequence of ones and zeros. Then certain useful sequences of ones and zeros are translated in terms of lower level programming language, and then certain useful sequences of lower level programming language are translated into a sequence of higher level programming language, and higher level programming language instructs screens to light up in a certain determined manner, which creates a yet higher abstraction of buttons and fields and windows and display text. No. Sorry, strategic decision about how to proceed. No. It's not. It's just I'm just deciding what I can skip, if anything. Well, yeah. Let's dwell on this a bit more because in what follows, I will prove also that it's not really that special thing about computers, but computers are here just a good example for thought, and we can get at some general relation of abstraction and machinery out of it. So abstraction pertains to machinery as such, not just computers. In a well-known and widely cited pronouncement of Arthur C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. This sounds something easy to agree with, but on second thought, it shouldn't be. It's a bit surprising, really. We understand that technology to be an extension of science, and science is a directly opposing principle to magic. And this opposition could be described as scientific radical insistence on casual continuity against casual discontinuity of magic. So how does discontinuity come back through technology? I would claim that we can pinpoint that this is precisely the abstraction where the effect of discontinuity can come from. If we take some technology from simple times when everything was still macro enough so that we could vividly experience, and take the example of a mill, for example. If you look at it from outside, water turns the wheel, very nice, might look ingenious, but this is not yet the magical effect. The magical effect is if you go inside and see the rest of the machinery and you do not really know what is outside. The discontinuity that is presented by the link from the mill to the next part, this is the source of magic effect, because this discontinuity is in fact conceptual. We cannot really know what is outside, what is the mechanism, because it could conceivably be another mechanism that would provide the energy, the source of rotation for the whole thing. So for the purposes of milling machine itself, it doesn't matter what drives it, which means that what drives it is abstracted away to its function of abstraction. So this is where the magic effect of technology comes from, because there is discontinuity in the sequence of causation, in fact, or where subsequent parts of the machinery are connected to the interface that provides a certain degree of indifference. And this is abstraction. So there is always an abstraction within the machine in order for it to be machine. Yes, so machine, therefore, by definition, involves abstraction. Machine parts are, unlike organism, replaceable. An object that is part of the machine loses its individuality and counts only insofar as it satisfies its function. That is, it successfully connects to its related parts and doesn't break down from the resulting pressure. So a part of the machine is not itself. It is a particular example of such and such things that are abstract determinations that describe its role. Okay, this concludes this point, and its purpose was just to more firmly establish how abstraction is inherently intertwined with technology. Yes, and computers are just objects that made this really obvious for whole technology. Okay, some parts I can skip. Well, the point I want to get to, of course, is, and the reason why, as I said, the reasons why computers are so useful example and tool for thought on this matter is because abstraction involved in technology is very clearly related to the division of labor. The layers of abstraction are also roughly correspond to different professional areas. What enables different levels of abstraction in machinery to operate also enables professionals handling them to communicate in chain with each other without really knowing each other's area of expertise. So this is what enables one can design a web page without having the slightest idea about physics and electricity and many technological layers in between. So relation of abstraction is what enables you to have this hugely complex industry that requires a bunch of different experts from electrical engineers to graphic designers and UX experts, and of course, a couple of ranks of programmers in between that are all indispensable to each other, yet they occupy totally different life worlds, at least in their labor, so to say. Why is this important? Because in the final part of this paper, I will argue that this model of division of labor is both actual and rational, vernünftig und wirklich, or for lack of better word, good. And I will explain why. Now, when I'm saying that this model of division of labor is actual and rational, I'm obviously implying that there are grounds for division of labor which are not both actual and rational, and hence, if we are Hegelians, neither. The obvious source of division of labor, and the one that is historically and probably still dominant, is the fact that labor is on one side beneficial, but an annoying thing, and we would generally prefer for someone else to do it and enjoy the fruits of this labor. And such motive for division of labor is obviously correlated with unequal relations of domination, when you can force or order someone to do some labor instead of you. Now, the grand progressive argument is that this might be actual for quite some time, but it is not rational. There is a complication, and we know it from the Hegel's master and slave dialectics. The one on the losing side, losing end of the division of labor also gains a decisive advantage long term. The slavery, the working for someone, means that the master relegates the realm of necessity to the slave so that he can enjoy the expropriated labor in the sphere of freedom and enjoyment. However, the master has not got rid of necessity, he just relegated it, and the necessary consequence is that the master has himself made himself dependent upon the slave. So the slave has gained decisive advantage precisely because he inhabits the sphere of necessity. So much is true Okay, so this is true both for old school ancien regime masters, and this dialectics repeat itself in the when the capital becomes the master, because this is the same advantage of the skill, or the fact that they labor is the whole source of the power that working class has. However, the difference between ancien regime masters and the capital is that there's a decisive change. The capital fights against this dialectic, or we could even say that the capital is defined against this advantage of the slave. This is, in fact, the Scheidung process, the separation process that Nathan analyzed in the morning. It was, of course, this is the process of expropriation of labor skill that Marx extensively analyzed, but more recently in detail, or at least I rely on Harry Braverman's analysis in the 70s. So the whole process of deskilling, the growth of, as Braverman shows, the growth of the capital coincided with a historical moment when technology enabled the capital to absorb and replace the artisanal skill. And this came after a long period of experimentation in early modern era, when the capitalists were still figuring out how to be capitalists, until they managed the key conceptual switch that they are buying labor power, not labor, and it is then their own responsibility to draw out as much profit as possible in time period when they get labor power at their disposal. So capital became truly capital only when it started to actively organize labor. And in this organization, the fight against the advantage of the slave, the worker, occurs. The capital appropriates the skill through which and makes the worker less qualified and hence replaceable. But we also know that this process is contradictory. The work can be de-skilled so far that it can, in fact, be finally replaced by machine. But at this limit point, the relation capital-worker breaks down, only the capital is left, and the capital has sabotaged its own means of control and domination at this particular point of economy. So the workers have to move elsewhere or become surplus labor, and at this point, the structure of social domination of capital must be upheld by alternative means, so violence. Yes, but yeah, pet minutes, pet. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, the big question is, where does this end? The spontaneous intuition everyone has at this point, especially now in the age of rise of artificial intelligence, is that this replacement of labor by technology does not end. But I'm not so sure, because I think that the capital knows at some level that it needs to need the workers. So the production can adapt. The process of transformations of capitalism in the last decades have had precisely this tendency to use the last feature that will remain exclusive to autonomous human agents, namely that they are autonomous human agents. So capital also learned to love the autonomy of the workers, because everything else can be replaced by machine. And this is something that at this point of development of artificial intelligence, when artificial intelligence is, I think, very far from being autonomous agents. However, it is like universal tools. It seems likely or probable or envisageable that the key property that the capital can still require from the worker is precisely their sovereignty or expertise over some subject matter. So it might be that, yes, so yes, this is perhaps the knowledge economy is the only thing that the capital has left. So in this sense, the argument here is this division of labor that we gather from the model of computer engineering it has actuality to it. So it persists, it will not be replaced. And I would also say that it is good in a sense that it is actual precisely because it has persistence against the capital. It also has a certain, it enables, it is a recognition of the worker retains a certain amount of independence, negotiating power, and hence dignity. And so, just to finish the argument, I think I can finish here. Where does the abstraction come in? I mean, if we are dealing with economy that must coordinate specialized workers, there is a paradox here in between. How do we know what knowledge we need if we, by definition, do not know it? It's like Menos paradox from Plato. And the knowledge economy must constantly solve it, and the abstraction is the model because the only way that we can know to require some expertise but do not possess it is if there is some abstract interface in between. So at least this much of abstraction is necessary in any highly specialized regime of highly specialized division of labor. So, and also, and this is ultimately the same thing that Marx was analyzing in the comments of James Mill, when this enabling pacificatory function of objects could be described that the object itself is abstraction of labor process, and then the object is the source of abstract and hence necessary partial recognition that we give, and this is the source of how it enables social link, and this is the necessary alienation that we get in complex economies.
Is this working? Is it working? Is it? Okay, time for questions. I think there should be a lot of questions.
I was wondering, I'm very fascinated currently about the sort of perceptions of the capabilities of artificial intelligence, and obviously if we are sane, we know that artificial general intelligence is nowhere near, but practically impossible. However, there has occurred this phenomenon, and if we're talking about a knowledge economy and this particular way of organizing labor, and you, from what I gather, argue that this is at least somewhat compatible with the innovation at the advent of artificial intelligence. How would you respond to the sort of very concrete problem of I forget what the official or the formal term is, but of the data cannibalization and of the sort of simulacrum creation. They're saying that artificial intelligence will sort of feed on itself, and in this way compromise our basis of
so you mean that the data is faulty or that it is stolen?
Well, not that it is stolen, but that the pure data, if you will. So the cutoff year was theoretically 2020. That the AIs are feeding on data that other AIs have produced at this point, and that this is projected to.
I'm not sure how I would solve it, but I think it is solvable, and someone with interest will solve it eventually. I mean, or not. Well, I think it's probably technically possible to curate the material that AI feeds on, and I guess. So
okay, yeah.
yeah, but this is a technical problem and beyond my capabilities.
Okay, no,
I think this is already the direction that they're going. That now I think we were in the fast food mess stage of the large language models. It is in fact, it seems to be possible to give a better content and perhaps less of it and get the same results. So it's not necessarily. I mean, the way you construct a language model, there are different possibilities, and probably there will be a variety of strategies there. But I mean, it's possible to exclude faulty data, I think.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciated this passage from Mill and the emphasis on this kind of necessity of objectification and its relation to abstraction. So I guess I wanted to ask you about the relationship of that maybe to the previous paper by Alexander. I mean, it seems to me like it's obvious that it's not like one can just completely get rid of any division of labor. Not everyone is going to do every task, etc. So, but how do you think about that in relation to the kind of process of education that Alexander was talking about? That is to say that you can have, of course, in a way, like a workers' council or anything like that is a kind of abstraction of the concrete, like, people and work and buildings, etc., that go on within it. But as he emphasized, it's also this continual process of re-engaging and sort of recursively re-investigating how that works and trying to understand it. So in your opinion, I mean, if you think about what you're saying about the division of labor being like rational and actual, etc., how would you think about that as related to forms of social organization that mediate it in one way or another, which we might think of as particular sort of forms of abstraction that have to do with management and collective labor, etc.?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, where do you find a position exactly? Perhaps how? I mean, so.
Sorry, what are you asking?
Where are you finding a position between? Okay,
it's not an opposition between the two. No opposition.
Okay.
I'm just wondering how you might think about the relationship.
Yes, those were the problems that were being solved in the ultimate drive of my paper. It's there might be trades-off in the serious conceptual trades-off in the socialist idea in the end. And yes, that was what Alexander was describing was a active engagement with this and in the Yugoslav experience. That's I didn't I don't have any more elaborate comment on that, but that would yes, that would be it would be what Alexander said would be a good example of the that there is a I mean these layers of abstraction and coordination, it involves politics in the end, and this is just a condition of possibility how it can happen, but it's also a source of many possible conflicts, that therefore political issues that can happen that needs to be solved. So condition of possibility of solution, but also the source of potential problems to be resolved.
Yeah, thanks. I think I have a boring question, maybe, and a misplaced question, because now when I'm thinking about it, might have misunderstood you. But there was something about the way in which you, I mean, the actuality of abstraction and the way in which you wanted to draw some kind of ontological conclusions from that.
Yes.
And I don't
that part was a bit new and a bit quick, and yes.
Yeah, because I was just wondering. I mean, it somehow. I mean, maybe it depends on how you place the question of ontology. Because it seems to me that you're not. By the way, in saying, for instance, well, the table is not just merely atoms or quarks or whatever, but rather the other way around, that you have that that assemblage of quarks is nothing but the table. But on the, I mean, somehow on the level of ontology, that seems to be you don't get rid of the the weird. I mean, it doesn't really explain anything, because all of these quarks tables, all of those, are already phenomenon for us. I mean, like Heidegger would say, they're already appearing to us as somehow sensible things, and you don't get that those phenomena. You don't get from that type of abstraction in itself, but rather the abstraction seems to me to presuppose that you already have phenomena that you're going to, do different. So, but I might be, I'm not sure. But this was my question.
Yes, yeah, it's not a wholly full-fledged theory yet. Maybe it's just a description of the properties that a good ontology should have. That would be my safe position. But there is a relation of abstraction of in between, and yeah, let's say, yeah, the safe answer is this. It's not an ontology. My personal ontology is a condition. It's a feature of true ontology, that structural feature of a good or useful ontology would have.
Okay, we have time for a really, really short question. Okay.
Is it a question of levels of abstraction? Because if we take it seriously, the games of abstractions started long ago with making abstraction. Now, where is the change between what you describe now and what is the condition of humanity anyway? I mean, abstractions, writing is an abstraction, making the Willendorf Venus is an abstraction, all kinds of things. Where is the change between cultural techniques? No change.
There is no, definitely.
Okay,
I agree with you. No,
that was the question. It just goes on and on.
Yeah, I try to. Yes,
Okay.
that part was a bit quick. Yes, it's all I was doing is like a retroactive illustration. I mean, things become more necessary to be aware now. But it was always. I mean, the abstraction came first, definitely, and it's an important point that again that too. So sorry. Next time.
Okay, thank you, Martin.